your ad stats aren't actually telling you the whole truth. You see, you can get a high click-through rate, very cheap leads, and some pretty solid engagement, which looks good on the surface, but oftentimes it usually means that your leads and clicks are tire kickers who just are exploring options, or they're clicking through with very low intent. So for example, there's one guy who wants you to replace some rotted boards on a deck that he's had since 2009. Two people have $12,000 budgets and they don't understand why a pergola costs more than that. And then there's one woman who is calling around just collecting prices, and in fact she's already talked to 3 contractors and she'll talk to 2 more. And somewhere buried in there, maybe there's one person who could actually be worth a real conversation. But why does this actually happen? Like, why, when the ads seem to be doing well, just aren't translating into closed high-end projects? Well, the problem begins with what I think is one of the biggest conceptions in all of marketing and advertising. And this is not just the case for outdoor living. This is also the case for basically any industry. And it's something that I wholeheartedly reject based on my experience of scaling some ad accounts from 0 to $30,000 a month in ad spend in less than 6 weeks at times. And it's this idea that the goal of ads is to just get clicks, right? Just get people to fill out the form, just generate the lead. That's the goal of the ad. If you can do that, then your ads are performing well. But here's the thing. There is a huge difference between an ad that gets leads and one that actually gets booked consultations with serious homeowners. And in this video, I'm going to walk through that exact difference so that you can actually get the high quality leads and consultations that'll allow you to close more high-end projects. So you see, most contractors, they make these short 10 to 20 second video ads that show off a project that they've done, and they don't have any narration. And the project may be, beautiful, right? You obviously probably do very good work, right? Or they may put up an image of a beautiful backyard transformation that says, get a free estimate, and the ad copy, the body text of the ad is 50 to 100 words long to just minimize the time to consume so that the most amount of people click through, because just generate the lead, right? And sure, you might get good engagement and some cheap leads doing this, but if you've been around the block, then you probably noticed that more than half of those leads will just be a waste of your time and money. And why is it the case that these types of ads just generate these leads that are a waste of your time and money? Well, it's because when these ads are so short, you can't really clearly outline who this is for, who it's not for, who you are, and ultimately the value of your offer. And so you get clicks from really anyone who is remotely interested in a nicer backyard, which is basically everyone. And that's why you get cheap leads, right? But you don't get the very specific type of leads who are actually serious and has high intent, because the way you get those people to inquire is not by making your ad sell the click. It's by selling your offer. Just point blank. The goal of an ad is to sell. And that doesn't mean closing someone from, a Facebook post, right? You're not going to get a homeowner to sign a contract on their feed, and you probably wouldn't want that either. That's not what I mean, right? What I mean is this. A 75 grand or 150 grand outdoor project is not an impulse purchase, right? The homeowner considering that has been thinking about it for a long time. They actually have pain associated with their current backyard. In other words, they're in a painful situation. They've looked at finished projects online, they've talked to their spouse, and they have a sense of what they actually want. In other words, these people are not just curious scrollers, right? They're in actual pain and they want to relieve it. And these people are usually the people who you actually want to attract, right? because if they're in pain, if they don't like what they currently have, if they've been considering it for a long time, then they have more motivation to actually change compared to someone who, for example, sees your ad, it looks beautiful, and they think to themselves, well, I'm just curious about the price, why not explore this? It says free estimate, so why not, you know? That lead will just be way worse quality, right? However, when it comes to the serious leads described here, there are fewer of those people. And so on the surface, they're a little bit more expensive to generate. However, they are cheaper in the long run, since those people will actually close, right? And so you may see online, for example, agencies or other people, they're posting about how cheap their leads are and it's going so well. But what they usually don't tell you is the types of leads that they're actually generating, right? Because if they actually got really good leads, then they wouldn't be as cheap. Sometimes they're a little bit more expensive. And so on the surface, it may feel like, well, these ads aren't actually doing that well, because I mean, my competitor or someone I saw on social media is getting leads for like half the price, right? But what isn't explained is actually the context, right? Who that lead actually is, okay? And in order to generate these good leads, then you need to clearly position your offer as the relief to their pain. And if they want it, then obviously they have to inquire and have the conversation with you. But positioning your offer as the best and most effective relief out there requires an actual sales argument. And that's what I mean by selling in your ads. And so you're not asking people to sign a contract through an ad, but you still need to make an actual sales argument for them to believe that what you have can actually help them and is superior to what else is out there, right? And in order to make a sales argument effective, it needs to cover three things. And so the first thing that you need to convey is that you understand exactly where they are, what their current situation is. In other words, answering the question that they have in the back of their mind, which is this for me, right? This is what will actually trigger the consumption and make people want to explore whatever it is that you have to offer. And when it comes to describing someone's situation and understanding where they are, not everyone will resonate with that, right? And that's also the point. We don't want the people who don't have any motivation to actually change. In other words, people who are not in pain, who don't feel like they have a problem, because they will just waste your time. But also, when we channel that pain, when we reflect their current situation back to them, they actually feel like you understand where they are, which builds a lot of trust. Like if you can describe someone's problem better than they can, they will want to consume or explore whatever it is that you have to offer. And if you know the specific pain points and problems that your best clients have had or that they have conveyed to you, for example, in the in-person meetings, then you can just use that in your ads to generate more of them. And that means that the crappy leads who maybe see that ad, they won't consume because they won't resonate with the actual problem that you're describing. Now, number two is that you need to also convey that you understand exactly what they want. In other words, their dreams and their desires. And I'm not talking about your services, I'm talking about the actual results. Because when people have the conversation in their head about what they want, they're not thinking in terms of services, right? They're thinking about how their neighbors will compliment them when they visit, how the kids will, play outside and splash in the pool, the barbecues and the conversations that they'll have in the backyard. That's what they're actually thinking about, right? Your service is just the mechanism for them to get there. So number three, you also need to convey that you are the contractor who can actually deliver work that helps them achieve their dreams and desires, right? And this is where, your credibility comes in, your authority, awards, etc., your story becomes relevant, right? So those are sort of the three pillars. But the thing is that a 15-second video of a finished patio doesn't really accomplish any of these, and neither does 80 words of copy or body text that ends with "get a free estimate," right? In fact, I'm actually making a sales argument right now, and it's not a 15-second video. It's actually a pretty long video. We're almost 12 minutes in. In order for me to actually convey this idea of mine to you and make you buy into it, is I need to first actually reflect your current situation, which I did in the beginning as best as I could. I also reflected back to you sort of what you want, which is like, you want higher quality leads, you want to close more high-end projects, right? And number 3, I mentioned also in the beginning that, hey, I've actually scaled some ad accounts to, $30,000 a month in ad spend, sometimes, in less than 6 weeks from zero, right? So now you're a little bit more receptive to my message. But on top of that, I'm giving you like all of this context, right? All of this explanation, basically trying to get you to my way of thinking, like bring you into my world, right? And the sort of point of that is, you're always selling something, whether it's an idea, whether it's a service, whether it's a consultation. Everyone needs to be persuaded to do something new, right? And oftentimes, if people are really stuck in one way of thinking, it requires a bit of, call it persuasion, in order for them to see beyond where they are. Same thing goes for your clients and customers. So here's what actually does convey all of these things. It's length and specificity, right? So that's to summarize this video right here. And I know that sort of runs against everything that you've probably heard about ads, which is, keep it short, get to the consultation. Call to action fast, don't lose them, just get the lead. And for low ticket offers, that's not entirely wrong. Like when something costs $40 or you're doing some low ticket like painting jobs, which you don't do, then flaming desire and curiosity is usually enough. But a homeowner who's about to invite a contractor onto their property to talk about, spending 80 grand, they're not making such decisions on impulse, like curiosity and desire alone, right? The homeowner is evaluating, and she's evaluating whether you understand her situation, whether she can trust you, and whether you're going to just waste her time, right? And the ad is actually the first place she makes that assessment. And so I bet that you go over all of these things when you meet them in person, right? You're probably someone who listens, you want to understand what they want, you want to actually give them a good service, right? But even though that's important, they're also evaluating you on anything that you put out there. Your marketing, like your ads, your content, anything that you put out there. They're always asking themselves the question of, is this the right person for me? Like, who are they? Who do they serve? What problem do they solve? So everything that you're putting out there is always building a story of who you are, what you do, and the problem that you solve. And people are evaluating it constantly. Same thing in your ads. They're making this assessment about you first second. Like, it's the first impression. So it's very important that we not only obviously try to listen, we try to understand their situation, what they want when we meet them in person, but it's also important on the ad level as well, on the front end of the business. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. And so when your copy is long enough to describe her situation specifically, when it names the actual frustrations she's been sitting with, when it speaks to the kind of project she actually wants, she's reading that and thinking, this person actually gets it, right? This person actually understands me, right? And the person who doesn't have that project, budget, or situation, they stop reading after 2 sentences, which is exactly what you want, because those are not the right people anyway. Those are not the people that you want, and those are not the people that are going to buy. And let me actually illustrate this. So ad number 1 here is, want to transform your backyard? We are XYZ company, and we build custom outdoor living spaces, anything from fire pits, pergolas, and paver patios. Call for a free estimate. That's ad number 1. Now ad number 2 is, if you keep leading guests away from your backyard, going to cookouts and parties anywhere else but your home, and have hundreds of pictures saved on Pinterest of your dream backyard. Okay, so 2 ads there. The first ad basically attracts really anyone with an actual pulse. It's like, want to transform your backyard? It's like, yeah, sure. Maybe I'm curious about that, especially if it's some beautiful imagery that backs this ad up, right? But the second ad hones in on a very specific person who has lived experiences that they find painful. And if you can see, or if you notice, the ad is not talking about just minor feelings and symptoms. It's not saying, are you unhappy with your backyard? Are you embarrassed about your backyard? It's actually explaining how the problem and how their pain manifests in their life. And so if you keep leading guests away from your backyard, that's basically how the embarrassment manifests, right? People think about their problem in these images, in these stories, in their experiences, right? They're not thinking, I'm unhappy with my backyard. They're thinking about how their chest is heavy when they have guests over and they will judge their backyard. So they're like leading the guests away from the backyard. Like, that's the actual lived problem that they have, right? And so when you give them that story and that image back to them, obviously the pain will sort of resurface again, which will motivate them to change, but it also creates this huge understanding and huge trust with you because they feel seen and they feel understood, right? And a homeowner, again, who reads that line, that opening line, and feels it, who recognizes that situation as their own, they're not going to read just out of mild curiosity, right? They're reading because something finally spoke directly to them. And if you can then position the offer correctly in the ad and explain why it's the right time to take action and clearly explain what they should do next, then the people that you'll attract will have way higher intent because they're actually looking to solve a painful problem, and you're explaining how you solve it for them specifically. And that's the exact person who shows up to a consultation, who's ready to talk about an actual real project, a high-end project, right? Okay, I have a little typo there, whatever. So test this for your own ads. And if you want me to just handle all of this stuff for you so that you can consistently attract qualified leads for high-end projects without adding work to your own plate or paying me a dime up front, then just book a call by clicking the link in the description. Hope this was useful. Goodbye.